Hi, I'm Jacqueline.
And I'm Courtney, and this is Caffeinated Crimes.
Welcome to part two of this three-parter. We are recording part one and part two back to back. So if we sound tired, it is 10 p.m. So we do
Yeah.
apologize for that.
Did you move your mic closer?
No. Am I louder?
I don't know. Maybe, you know what it probably is? I have both
Because
AirPods in now.
you have two AirPods in?
I was
Yeah.
like, woohoo, let me turn my volume down. Hold on.
You're like, you're so loud. I got my second win. I'm re-energized, I'm ready to
So
go.
excited.
It is really
No, I'm
funny
just
because
an
as
idiot.
as we were waiting for part one to finish converting before we logged back on for part two, I had to go out and get a Tums because, I am 6 months pregnant. And Andrew's like, "Oh, are you done already?" And I was like, "No, we're just halfway."
Yeah, I went downstairs to refill my water and take my birth control. And I came down and Kevin looked at me. I was like, I'm not done yet. And he was like, oh, I figured. Because we've done so many like double recordings lately that I have
Yeah,
to like go down like in the middle of, and
in
he's just
between.
like, yeah, that tracks.
Yeah, it's just our nightly break. Yeah, I also love that we're at the points in our life where we take a break and I gotta get a Tums and you gotta get your birth control. That's where we are
Yeah.
currently.
Normally I'm also getting a Tums because I just got stomach issues. I don't know. I don't know what it is.
Oh
But
man.
I didn't bring it up last time. Do you have a baby bird update? And it's happy/sad.
Oh no.
That one bird is 100% dead.
Oh, that's sad.
That
That's
one
sad.
one of the baby birds is definitely not alive.
Well, there's three of them, right?
Only two.
Oh, there's only two. I
So I
thought I saw
don't
three. Okay. All right. Well, 50%'s not bad.
there were three eggs. So I don't know. Maybe
Oh,
one was empty. I don't know. I only see one that's very much alive, and
mm-hmm.
one that's very much dead because it
Oh,
has not moved since this morning. And I even like was like tapping on the window to try to get it to move.
yeah.
It is not moving. And the other alive bird's just like stomping all over him, which is
Oh,
weird.
that's
But
sad.
it's pretty big now, so I'm kind of surprised it hasn't
Yeah.
flown away because they said like 2 weeks and it's been over 2 weeks. But
Hmm. They
um,
like your house. They want to hang out there.
yeah, I just what's gonna happen to that other dead bird?
I was wondering that too, but I wasn't gonna ask it. But yeah, like what, who?
Hopefully, I will be moving soon and won't have to think about it.
I was gonna say
Somebody
that, but
else.
I didn't know if you were sharing that yet.
Yeah, I mean, we put in a notice to vacate. So no matter where we go, we're not staying here.
That's true. You are moving somewhere. You're moving in
Moving
this
some.
room that we just got cleaned out for
I
you.
know. Sorry, baby powers. You gotta find somewhere else to stay. Uncle Kevin and Aunt Courtney are homeless.
We're kicking you out. Like, it's okay. The baby can stay in their parents' room for a little bit. It's okay.
It's
We need this
fine. It's
room.
fine. Oh, but so hopefully but they did I already say on the podcast they got the hornet's nest? Yeah, I said that
Yes.
2 weeks ago. But
Yes.
yeah, don't have much banner besides that, except I'm
Well,
thoroughly depressed that there's now a dead, and it's not
yeah.
even like a baby bird, it's like a
They
toddler
were
bird.
big. Yeah, they were big when you sent that picture. But thanks for that depressing update before
You're
this
welcome.
depressing episode. That's how we like to do things around here. So
Yeah, I don't know.
yeah.
That's my life.
Also, I'm just realizing now as we are in part two, so who knows how many weeks it's been at this point, that we did not talk about the shooting at the Donald Trump rally in part one somehow as an
You know, I
update.
meant I meant to I meant to bring
Like,
that up. We were talking about something and I was like, I should bring this up, and then
yeah. How did
it
that slip our
didn't,
minds?
but
So yeah, that happened this past weekend as of the time that we
hmm
are recording this. Yeah, I don't know what more has come out about it since between the time that we are recording this and the time that you guys are
yeah.
hearing this. So there may be more to it. But first, like assassination attempt of a president or someone running for president in like decades. Like,
Since what? Ronald Reagan?
I
Jimmy
think
Carter.
so.
Wait, was Ronald Reagan after Jimmy Carter? Whoop,
I
I don't
think,
know.
yeah. Mm, I think so. I don't know. We're not clearly we're great with
Guys, we
our
do
US
not
president.
know US presidents. We don't know US geography. We don't know
That, there's
sheep.
only so much room in your brain for things, and so we've just
Hmm.
filled it with too much true crime knowledge that some of that other stuff you learned in school just had to be dumped. So that was
Yeah,
one of them apparently. But yeah, yeah.
super crazy.
So yeah, I mean, not really a whole lot else to say about that because there is such limited information at this time. But just, I mean, pretty wild. I personally am confused about what the security was like that this was like able
I
to
know.
happen. Um,
That's so like just on a building
yeah,
there.
like, do you not scope out all of those buildings as a Secret Service? Is that
They're
not part of
supposed
what they
to.
do?
Thought they were supposed to be on every single building there. So
Exactly. Like anything within
somebody's
like
getting
eyeshot.
fired.
Yeah. So anyway, but I just thought about that and was like, wow, we did not talk about this as far as true crime updates because that is a very big true
A
crime
big
update.
one. Yep.
But that being said, I think we're good to go ahead and dive into part two for you guys.
Do we just burp
So
at the same time?
yes, we just become best friends.
Because I muted my microphone and let out the biggest burp. And then I look up and I was like, she burping too.
I'm gonna leave
Uh,
that in. Not the actual burp, but our discussion of the
yes.
burp.
Okay.
Oh
Sorry,
gosh.
we did a little silly goofy before the sad saddie.
Yes, that's our life motto. So we left off at part one that Ron and Nicole's bodies have been found, and OJ has been notified, and Nicole's family has also been notified. And Nicole's sister Denise responded by saying he killed her, he finally killed her, in response to learning that her sister is dead. So that's where we left off with part one. So, back at Rockingham, a criminalist, Dennis Fung, arrived at 7:10 a.m. and tested the red substance on the Bronco. It was only a presumptive test, so not 100% accurate, but it did suggest the presence of blood. And they also confirmed that the glove at the murder scene was a left-hand glove, and the glove at Rockingham was a right-hand glove. So now they decide they need a search warrant for the Rockingham house. They were able to get the signed warrant at around noon on June 13th, around the same time OJ was getting back from Chicago. So OJ had been in Chicago to play in the Hertz Invitational Golf Tournament. As we mentioned, he had had a partnership with Hertz since 1970. Around that time, he was in the commercials for their rental cars with a grandmother yelling, "Go, OJ, go." He was their spokesperson for many years. And in 1994, he was basically like their house golfer and would travel the country playing in golf tournaments on their behalf. So OJ had called for a criminal defense attorney, Howard Weitzman, to meet him as soon as he got back to LA. So one of the officers took OJ to a more secluded area of the property and arrested him there so as to not have it photographed by all of the media. However, some media were still able to get photos. OJ agreed to go to the police station and speak with police, and Howard Weitzman went with him and also his business lawyer, Skip Taft, and Simpson agreed to be interviewed by the police. So OJ said him and Nicole had tried to rekindle their relationship, but it hadn't worked out. He said the last time he saw her the night before was leaving Sydney's dance recital at around 6:30 or 6:45 p.m., and he had taken the 11:45 flight to Chicago. So OJ said he parked his Bronco at Rockingham around 7, 8, or 9 o'clock, which is not very specific, is a pretty broad window, which maybe it's different like when you're famous, but I feel like especially if you have a flight to catch, like you're pretty specific about times. It's not like everything is just kind of
Yeah.
all over the place. Like if you know you have a flight to catch at a time, like you kind of remember when you left your car somewhere and what you did and a sequence of
Yeah.
events.
Well, you'll definitely see like later on when we talk about it how close he cuts this flight basically to
Mm,
leaving his house to getting to the airport, which I guess if you're rich, you probably I think he flew on a private. I don't know. I don't know.
yeah,
If
I
he
wasn't sure
just
about that. This was like it might depend on how famous you are,
this
what
was
that situation
also
is.
pre 9/11. So
True,
again,
true.
airports were a lot more loosey-goosey then. So,
Yeah.
but it was
Probably
a
a
very,
quicker experience.
yeah, quick
Yeah.
turnaround.
But he basically is just giving all these like roundabout answers. He said that he hung out with Cato and they got burgers. He did have an injury on his hand, and he said he got it in Chicago when he broke a glass. He said he went crazy after the phone call about Nicole being dead. And he said he also had a bit of an injury before he left for Chicago too, that he had been bleeding like a little bit before he left. So again, just kind of some odd, non-specific answers. Um, this interview lasted 32 minutes and was the last interview they had with OJ. And prosecutors knew immediately that this interview was botched. And I'm like, 32 minutes for like
32 minutes, like for who you think could be the prime suspect, and you're just like, oops.
yeah. We spend 32 minutes bullshitting before we start recording these episodes.
Yeah.
Like talking about nothing. And like
Yep.
in 32 minutes you conclude an interview with your primary suspect of a double homicide. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So at 10 a.m. on June 13th, just 10 hours after the bodies were found, the first local news truck showed up. And soon many news stations were at the Bundy scene in the Rockingham house. The video of OJ being arrested was soon circulated, and the June 27th issue of Time featured OJ's mugshot on the cover, and they had darkened the photo. So the media went wild about the murders of Nicole Brown and Ron Goldman, with the possibility of OJ being responsible. Every news station was reporting about the crime, and Patty was the first who was notified of Ron's death once they had identified him. And she quickly called Fred, and they both called Kim because they didn't want her to find out about her brother's death from the radio or TV. So she flew home from college as soon as she found out, and the media was quickly rumoring, like we said, that Ron was Nicole's boyfriend. They were having an affair, but the family says that was not true. Ron was very open with them and his friends, and if he had been dating Nicole, they would have known. And Ron's best friend also confirmed this in an article with the LA Times, and it seemed likely that when Nicole went out to eat that night, they went to Mezzaluna where Ron worked, and someone had forgotten a pair of sunglasses and he had offered to return them. Like we mentioned in part one, Ron was the type of person who would like bring them over just because he lived close by. So again, they may have been friends and had some kind of
Mm-hmm.
prior friendship. We're not 100% certain, but they were not in a relationship. It seems likely he was just dropping off these sunglasses.
Yeah.
So the media also frequently referred to him as Nicole Brown Simpson's friend instead of using his actual name. And even in most of the books used for this research, he was barely mentioned. Saturday Night Live even aired a skit at one point about Ron, Nicole, and OJ Simpson. And the point of it was like pointing to OJ being guilty, but Kim was very unhappy with the skit. And she tried to call and complain, but couldn't get through. The Goldman family did name a few members of the media who were sensitive and honest and that they felt helped them in the upcoming months. So they listed Shoreen Magham, Dan Abrams, Cynthia McFadden, Shelley Ross, Barbara Walters, and Dominic Dunn. So Dominic Dunn had actually lost his daughter, Dominique Dunn, who had been murdered by her boyfriend. And she is an actress best known for her role in Poltergeist. So Braun's family is just like, he's forgotten in all of this, in this whole story.
Yeah, and I wanted to go ahead and include those names too, because so many names get thrown around in this case from the defense attorneys, the prosecution, who we're about to get into, like all these people. And so for Ron's family to like name these people who helped them, like I also wanted to name them to kind of
Yeah,
like give them credit since they felt that they were treated well by those people.
yeah, definitely. And speaking of the big names in this case, so Marcia Clark was the prosecutor for this case. Marcia graduated from Southwestern University School of Law in LA in 1979 and worked as an apprentice criminal defense attorney in a top firm. And she actually helped defend James Doc Holliday, who was a leader of the notorious Black Guerrilla family. And Marcia soon knew that she wanted to work in the district attorney's office. She felt that she just like couldn't do anything but that. Like that was what she was meant to do. So she started working at the LA DA's office in 1981. She loved trying cases and being in the courtroom. And Marcia felt very strongly that OJ was responsible due to his history of domestic abuse. However, she put off filing the case against him until the blood tests were reviewed. And on June 14th, Dennis Fung was reviewing the samples and passed them off to Colin Yamauchi, who is an LAPD criminalist. And Colin actually thought OJ had an alibi and was just running the test to exclude him. So he spent June 14th and 15th testing the samples, and instead of just doing ABO typing, they asked him to do a DNA typing on the samples. So the blood drops on the pathway at Bundy matched OJ's blood type, and the blood on the glove found at Rockingham was a mixture of OJ's as well as Nicole's and Ron's. On June 16th, they agreed that OJ needed to be brought in immediately, and they had made an agreement with OJ's new lawyer, Robert Shapiro, that they would not arrest OJ, and Shapiro had promised that OJ would surrender himself when it came time. So this was a fairly common agreement when they believed that the defendant wasn't a flight risk. Like, we're not going to arrest you now, but like, when it's time, you need to bring yourself in.
Yeah.
So on Friday, June 17th, the prosecutors agreed that they would call Shapiro at 8:30 a.m. and ask OJ to surrender himself at 11 a.m. at the Parker Center. He would then be taken 2 blocks to the criminal courts building, and at 11:45 a.m., they would hold a press conference. So at 8:30, they called Shapiro and let him know that OJ was being charged with the double homicide with special circumstances. And the special circumstances part meant 2 things. So one, that OJ could be eligible for the death penalty, and number 2, that bail would not be allowed in this type of case. So Shapiro knew that OJ would be arrested and would remain in jail until his trial, which could take months. So Shapiro had only been OJ's lawyer for less than 3 days at this point, and he did have OJ take a polygraph, but this is pretty common for defense attorneys to do to their clients to try to get them to come clean. And OJ did fail this polygraph badly. But as we know and have said many times, polygraphs are not reliable, especially when the person is related to the victim. Like, you're in a very heightened state of arousal. Like, those results don't necessarily indicate deception. So Shapiro recruited Henry Lee, who is the chief police scientist for Connecticut, and Michael Baden, the former chief medical examiner for New York City, and he flew them out by June 16th. So now we're back to after the phone call from the prosecution. OJ was not at his Rockingham house. So basically they set up a ruse, and his friend Al A.C. Cowlings went to his house pretending to be him. And OJ went to his friend Robert Kardashian's house in Encino. So Shapiro would have to go there to retrieve him. However, he did not call ahead to warn them and had them prepared.
So Shapiro showed up at the house at 9:30 a.m. and OJ was there with his girlfriend, Paula Barbary. Again, sorry if I pronounced your last name wrong. Many of the people hired by the defense team were now at the house, and a psychiatrist was there to evaluate OJ. And they were trying to just gather as much information as possible for his defense. So they're trying to be like, okay, let's get a psychiatrist. Let's talk to you. Let's do this. Let's do that. Trying to get everything together. And Michael Baden would later say there were cuts on his hands, but those seem more consistent with the story of broken glass versus a knife. But again, this is very rushed, just kind of seeing it once. Another fun fact about this case, we actually saw Michael Baden at CrimeCon, so kind of weird that this connection came back.
Yeah.
He didn't talk about that at his thing.
Yeah, he had
Probably
a
for
lot
good
of other
reason.
things to talk about. So
Yeah, he's lived a big life.
yeah, he's done a lot.
So Shapiro tried to keep in contact with LAPD and saying, "Oh, he will surrender. It just might be later. Like, he's coming. It just might be later." And he kept trying to prolong it. OJ also had demands. He said he wanted to shower and he wanted to talk to his mother and children first. And at noon, the LAPD are like, "We're not going to wait any longer. We're coming to pick him up because, like, you had an agreement and now you're breaking that agreement. We're just going to come pick him up and you missed your chance."
Like, this is not how it works when you're being arrested.
No, no, it's not. So Shapiro gave them the address they were at, and they showed up quickly, and they went to tell OJ, and they could not find him in the house. So AC had also shown up at this point, was also missing, and the officer instructed that no one was allowed to leave. And around 2 p.m., the LAPD held their press conference telling the public how OJ was ordered to surrender himself and did not. And they said he's now missing and that everyone should be on the lookout for him. And they also said anyone found to be helping him would be charged with harboring or assisting a fugitive, which was a felony, because they're like, this man is on the run and he should be arrested.
Yeah.
So we've mentioned him before, and one of the bigger names from the OJ trial is Robert Kardashian. And at this point, we all know the Kardashians. So, I mean, they're a pretty big name. Again, Robert, Chris, and their 4 kids would go on vacations with OJ and Nicole, and they also both got divorced around the same time. Robert had gotten a law degree, but had given up practicing for the business world until after the murders happened. So after the murders, he reinstated his law license and went to help with OJ's defense. Which, like, I mean, cool being a good friend, but you're how many years out of
Yeah.
practicing law?
Yeah, like are you the most qualified person to help your friend? I don't know.
Yeah, very weird. But Shapiro and Kardashian participated in the press conference, and Shapiro begged OJ to turn himself in, and Kardashian read a letter that they said OJ had written that day, and it actually kind of seems like it was written 2 days earlier, so not exactly that day because it did read as like a suicide note. So knowing it was written possibly 2 days before definitely changes the implications of the note. And Kardashian read it at the press conference, and this letter is out there. You can find it. It's just very long for an already long case. Didn't feel
Hmm.
I needed to read it. If you want to read it, you can find it easily.
Yeah.
And OJ had written 2 other letters to his mom and children, but both of those were sealed. So LAPD also put out an all points bulletin for AC Cowlings, and around 6 p.m., LA media confirmed the description of the car police were looking for, which was a 1993 white Ford Bronco. So one couple passed the car and saw AC Cowlings in it, and it was about 80 miles south of Encino, but 5 minutes from Nicole's grave, which is something they kind of wondered if OJ might do is go to Nicole's grave. So again, kind of before the times of cell phones and car phones are new, this couple doesn't have it. They pull over and report it to the police. They said the car was driving back towards LA, and this is where the notorious police chase begins. We've all seen videos of it. We've all seen it. Um, my mom actually says frequently, she was like, I remember watching it on TV. I was breastfeeding you because I was a baby.
That's so funny.
So she was like, I was just sitting there watching it while
She's
doing
like, I
that.
got nothing else to do. I'll watch this whole thing
Yeah.
unfold.
So police had AC and the Bronco in a parking lot, but AC said he had OJ in the back and he had a gun to his head. So police backed off a little bit and AC took off. AC turned his emergency lights on and called 911 from the car. Again, they're rich, they can afford a car phone. And he said again he had OJ and OJ had a gun to his head. A news helicopter was able to catch the chase on video, and approximately 95 million Americans watched some portion of the case on television. 95 million,
That's insane. I mean, not
which,
surprising, but insane.
yeah, which exceeded that year's Super Bowl by 5 million.
Wow.
So
Wow.
this was more watched than the Super Bowl.
Hmm.
So AC drove them back to OJ's house on this chase and arrived shortly before 8 p.m. OJ finally stepped out of the Bronco at 8:53 p.m., almost an hour after they got back, and he was holding family pictures and saying, I'm sorry, guys. I'm sorry I put you through this. They let OJ use the bathroom, have a drink, and talk to his mom. This man who's been on the run for 10 hours now, almost.
Hmm. Hmm.
Mhm. And then they finally arrested him. He was arraigned in municipal court on Monday, June 20th, and he pleaded not guilty. So the grand jury began quickly. And in her book, Marcia Clark said normally she would have weeks or months to like prepare for a grand jury. And kind of like a grand jury is like you get to go before them and kind of see like, does your case have substance before taking it to like an actual trial? And so normally she's like, you have more time, but this I have like days, basically. She normally would interview every witness multiple times, but in this case, she only had 10 days to prepare for everything. Like
Wow.
10 days. And they wanted to get the grand jury indictment before the preliminary hearings. And she called Jill Shively as one of the first witnesses to try and help prove that OJ had opportunity, as well as try and place him at the crime scene. Jill Shively had witnessed OJ near Bundy Lane the night of the murder. So Jill had been battling the flu and she was starving. So she was finally getting her appetite back, hadn't really been able to eat. And she wanted to go to her favorite salad bar and needed to hurry to beat their 11 p.m. closing time. So as she approached the intersection where Bundy meets San Vicente Boulevard, the light was about to turn red, so she sped up. A white car almost ran into her and she slammed on her brakes, as did the white car and like a third car. And a man in the white car honked his horn and screamed, "Move your damn car! Move it! Move it!" And Jill recognized the voice as O.J. Simpson. Again, O.J. Simpson is in movies. He's on TV. He's doing
Hmm.
NFL broadcasts. He's in commercials. Like, people knew who O.J. Simpson was. He was a
Pretty
celebrity.
pretty well known.
He's basically the Travis Kelce of the 1990s. Like, at this point, everyone has seen that man on TikTok, on a commercial, whatever. Like, people
Hmm.
know him and are going to recognize him.
Yeah.
So prosecutors asked Jill, like, don't tell anyone, don't go talking to people. But she did end up doing an interview for money. So this does bring up the credibility of a witness when it comes to a trial because it looks like they're just trying to say stuff for a payday. And the grand jury did not go well and kind of ended up being a bust. So they ended up having to have a preliminary hearing. So, in the preliminary hearings, the prosecution and defense were going at it very quickly. Tensions are high from the start. So Marcia had found out OJ had bought a knife a few weeks earlier and asked detectives to search the house, but they did not find it. And a representative of the defense asked OJ about it and found it easily. They asked a third party to go to the house to document the status of the knife, which the condition was pristine. So then the prosecution asked for hair samples from OJ because hairs had been found at the crime scene. This is a very standard procedure, like it happens, testing, whatever. And they were like, "How many hairs do you need?" And she was like, "I don't know. How many ever it takes. I don't know. Um, how many ever is needed for the examination?" So the defense fought and got the judge to agree to only 10 hairs, when normally 100 hairs is required. This later changed to at least 40, but no more than 100. So, I mean, they're like full out battling about how many hairs are allowed to be taken from OJ.
Wow.
And it just continued on. And the defense was trying really quickly to be on the offense as much as they could and try to just make the prosecution look incompetent. So they're just trying to like get some doubt in there, like doubt even in the prosecution's minds about themselves. Like they're just going at it. So Dr. Irwin Golden testified in the preliminary hearings, and he answered all of the questions, but under cross-examination, the credibility of the LA Medical Examiner's Office took a very big hit. So the defense brought up between 30 and 40 errors or incidents of mishandled evidence, some being quite significant. Nicole's bloodstained dress was improperly dried. A bottle of liver bile was improperly marked as containing urine. The bodies were stored in unlocked homicide crypts, allowing anyone with access to tamper the evidence. Personal effects were not immediately removed and placed in envelopes, as policy requires. Nicole's stomach contents were mistakenly discarded. Nicole was never examined for evidence of sexual assault, and also the wounds to Nicole and Ron were not adequately examined to see whether they could have been inflicted by the 15-inch knife the prosecutors were saying was the murder weapon. And now Dr. Golden is also on the stand being like, I mean, I guess two knives could have been used, which doesn't look good for the prosecution.
What a shit show.
So the
What a shit show.
LAPD, the LA Medical Examiner's Office, everyone is fucking up this case.
Yeah,
Like fucking it up
definitely.
royally. So Shapiro around this time didn't want to add any more members to the defense team. He's like, "No, we're good. It's me. I got it." But OJ and his friends were thinking they needed to add a few more because Shapiro had a reputation as a plea bargainer. So that was kind of his thing. is like he got his clients to take plea bargains. So OJ wanted to get Gary Spence as an addition to the team, but Gary did not want to be seen as second lawyer and he didn't want to be involved. So Shapiro said he was also talking to Johnny Cochran about joining the team. And Spence agreed it was likely a better fit as well. He was like, yeah, that guy's probably better than I am. So Johnny Cochran was officially hired on July 18th. And since the beginning, Cochran had slowly been laying the groundwork for joining OJ's defense team. After the Bronco police chase, Cochran was interviewed on TV calling AC a hero and that he helped save OJ's life. So Johnny had big dreams and he was like, I'm going to lay it down now. He was like, I'm going to be like, see, OJ is not that bad.
Wow.
He also encouraged the audience to keep an open mind until all evidence was shown.
So Cochran made a seamless transition onto the defense team. On July 22nd, there was an arraignment hearing where OJ pleaded, quote, absolutely 100% not guilty. Also at this hearing, Judge Lance Ito was assigned to the case. Ito's wife, Margaret York, was the captain of the LAPD, so the defense was given the opportunity to have him removed, but both Cochran and Shapiro agreed that he would be fine. Which, what a wild, like, a judge and the captain of the
Yeah,
LAPD.
I feel like that would cause so much, like you getting dismissed in so many cases because you're like,
Exactly.
that's such a big part of like every
Yeah,
trial.
like exactly. I'm like, that's such a conflict of interest in every single trial that could possibly come up
Hmm.
for you. But right around the time of the formal arraignment on July 22nd, Fred Goldman learned that Sharon, remember Ron's biological mom, who was not involved in his life much, was filing a wrongful death civil suit against O.J. Simpson. So Sharon sought an unspecified amount of damages for the loss of Ron, and Fred was understandably very angry. Sharon was not in Ron and Kim's life after they divorced. Kim rarely spoke to her. At the time of Ron's death, she didn't even know like her current name or phone number, like had very, very little contact with this woman. She had also given the family a hard time getting papers signed to allow Ron to be buried. And Kim had called and begged her to do it, and she refused until she showed up at the funeral. And she'd been absent for 20 years at this point and is now coming back filing this wrongful death lawsuit. So, understandably, his
Hmm.
family is very upset about that.
Yeah, because Kim was like, I know I should tell my mother. I don't know where she's living. I don't know her phone number. And like in that call, when she was like, will you please just sign it? Like, if you've ever cared about me, please just sign it. And she hung
Mm-hmm.
up on her. So it
My
was just like
gosh.
coming out of the woodwork to try and pretend
Yeah,
to care at this point.
disgusting. So soon jury selection began, and around this time, the prosecution did say that they would not be seeking the death penalty. So jury selection began on September 26th. The prosecution did request that the jury be sequestered. 219 potential jurors arrived on the first day. 90 were excused based on their questionnaires due to employers who wouldn't pay for a long jury service or other personal situations that made serving on such an extensive lengthy jury impossible. During jury selection on October 17th, Faye Resnick, who was a friend of Nicole's, released a book about the murder. So, again, this is like trial has not even started yet.
Hmm. Yeah.
Um, so Faye Resnick had become friends with Nicole in 1990 and had lived with her briefly before she went to rehab, and she was convinced that OJ had killed Nicole. She said he wouldn't let the kids like play in the house or be in the kitchen due to the mess they made, and she decided shortly before OJ's trial that she would write a book after having been given advice by a psychic. So she got a six-figure advance and was looking for a collaborator, and she made the manuscript that the book would be based on, titled Nicole Brown Simpson, The Private Diary of a Life Interrupted. So they presented Nicole as a brainless, sex-obsessed young woman, and she presented OJ as a jealous former spouse who discussed his thoughts of murdering Nicole. However, Faye was not going to be a great witness for the prosecution because of her history of drug abuse and now her attempt to profit off of the crime, similar to Jill Shively. So Judge Ito suspended selections for 48 hours due to the release of the book. So, of course, this just caused the public to be even more interested in this book, and it was a #1 New York Times bestseller. So once it resumed, Judge Ito did order the remaining candidates to not watch any television, read any newspapers or magazines, or step foot in a bookstore. And he stood firm on this and even dismissed a potential juror after she admitted to watching recordings of Beverly Hills 90210 and Melrose Place, even though her husband had like deleted all the commercials. Like she's just watching like the show, but
She
he
just needed her
still
shows, okay?
right. She's like, I don't care the news. I just want to watch my shows. But she was dismissed. 15 of them were Black, 6 were white, and 3 were Hispanic. And on the official jury of 12, there were 2 men and 10 women. So Shapiro called in F. Lee Bailey. So F. Lee Bailey had also been the attorney for Dr. Sam Shepard and Patty Hearst, and OJ had quite a few lawyers on his team, and up until this point, Shapiro was the lead. But 2 weeks before the trial, Shapiro suggested to OJ to maybe take a plea deal, like we talked about, and OJ ignored him, and this is really when Cochran started to be the lead of this lawyer team, and that would come to be known as the Dream Team. However, the Goldman family would refer to them as the Scheme Team.
Which I loved.
Yes.
I was like, that's so
definitely.
funny.
So before the trial began, the defense tried to push to not allow OJ's domestic abuse history to be allowed in court, and Judge Ito ruled the prosecution could use some of the domestic abuse history, but not all of it. So on January 24th, 1995, the trial began, and court TV was allowed in the courtroom and was broadcasting the entire trial. So Christopher Darden was with Marcia Clark and William Hodgman on the prosecution side, and he delivered the opening statements. So they had divided up the work. Marcia got testimony about what happened on June 12th. Hodgman got the scientific evidence, and Darden got everything that was left over. So it made sense for him to start the trial. So he focused heavily on the domestic abuse in his opening statement, and Marcia Clark took over and summarized the day of the murder, June 12th. So this is pretty risky in an opening statement, but Marcia was confident in her evidence and timeline, and Johnny Cochran then began his opening statement and tried to present a rebuttal to the prosecution. He also brought up Faye Resnick and claimed she and Nicole would regularly do drugs together, and Cochran's opening statement was also pretty risky. A few days in, Bill Hodgman started to feel some chest pain and was taken to the hospital, and he had an irregular pattern in his electrocardiogram, and he was only 41 years old, so he was taken off the trial. Also around this time, they believed Cochran was committing misconduct in his opening statement. The prosecution is saying that Cochran is throwing in potential witnesses without disclosing it to them, and Judge Ito agreed to put off the conclusion of Cochran's opening statement until Monday, January 30th, and he would allow Clark to make a brief reopening statement. So already this trial is just starting out way different than a normal trial.
Yeah, like you have jury selection and then you have this book coming out. And then you have these opening statements that are risky on both sides. And then one of the prosecution lawyers basically like has not a heart attack, but like
Like a
an
heart
issue. And
issue,
it's just
yeah.
like, what has happened? Like everything that could go wrong is going wrong.
Yeah. So the trial resumed on the 30th, and on January 31st, Judge Ito allowed the prosecution to start calling their witnesses. The first witness was Sharon Gilbert. So she was the 911 operator who was working on January 1st, 1989, when one of the domestic abuse calls came in. And Darden played the 911 tape for this, and you could like hear silence and then a woman screaming, the sounds of someone being hit, and they could see that the call was coming from 360 North Rockingham. When police arrived, Nicole's face was battered and she was yelling that OJ was going to hit her, and Darden also called the police officer John Edwards as a witness. In Cochran's cross-examination, he tried to insinuate that Nicole had been drunk. He also brought up that John Edwards was a part of a problem group within the LAPD for using excessive force or other misdeeds, and Edwards did not arrest OJ or even file a complete report of this incident, and the prosecution slowly showed how officers failed Nicole in this 1989 incident. Next, they called another witness and played the tape of the 1993 911 call, possibly the most heartbreaking of these 911 calls. Nicole had called 911 on October 25th, 1993. She said, "He's back, please. He's OJ Simpson. I think you know his record. Could you just send someone over here, please? Could you please send someone over?" And it was obvious like she had been crying, was very upset. And the operator told her to stay on the line. And she said, "I don't want to stay on the line. He's going to beat the shit out of me." And you can eventually hear OJ in the call. And Nicole is begging OJ to leave. And he eventually says, quote, "I'm leaving with my two fists is when I'm leaving." So pretty graphic 911 call that
Hmm.
shows what was going on then. So Darden continues with witnesses to portray the domestic abuse in OJ and Nicole's relationship. He called Nicole's sister Denise to the stand, and she said at one point in 1987 at a restaurant that OJ grabbed Nicole's crotch and said, "This is where babies come from and this belongs to me." Denise said that Nicole dismissed it and wrote it off as nothing. She also told another story of OJ throwing her up against the wall, trying to throw her out of the house. And the defense objected a lot during her testimony. It may not have gone exactly as the prosecution wanted, and the jury started to view her kind of poorly versus sympathetically. Denise Brown's testimony was one of the last on the domestic violence part of the prosecution's case, and the defense did not cross-examine Denise much. They stood by their stance that this was a murder case, not a domestic violence case.
So now Marcia Clark takes over for the prosecution. She calls many witnesses to detail the day of June 12th. So Robert Arisk, the first member of LAPD who arrived at the Bundy crime scene, was called to the stand. He said when he arrived, he saw the bodies and walked through the house, which is when he saw Justin and Sydney. He said he then called for reinforcement, and then Cochran cross-examined him, and Cochran asked him about the Ben and Jerry's ice cream that Risk saw and had said it was, quote, melting versus melted. Cochran spent hours asking him about the ice cream and state of the ice cream, whether it was melted or in the act of melting. Like, it apparently went on for hours, this back and forth about
Oh my God.
the difference between these two words. He also brought up the delay in the coroner arriving and making determining time of death difficult, but neither was particularly relevant. Even if the coroner had arrived immediately, they may not be able to pinpoint a more specific time of death. That's difficult even today with like 30 more years of, you know, knowledge on that. So Cochrane used this tactic of asking the same questions over and over again on all of the other officers who appeared on the stand. Cochrane actually spent 4 days cross-examining Tom Lang, who was the co-lead detective. And so Chris Darden is starting to just get very annoyed with how this trial is going. I mean, imagine sitting there for 4 days while someone's being cross-examined. Like, that's a lot. Um,
Yeah, definitely.
and Darden had actually answered some questions on TV about the trial that could be harmful. And so the DA's office is like, no more, buddy. Do not talk to TV reporters anymore. Nope, 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 nope. So during this 4 day cross-examination of Tom Lang, Cochran brought up Faye Resnick and asked if she had moved in with Nicole. And emotions were high at this point, and there were a lot of objections from the prosecution. And Darden even got short with Cochran and kind of let his emotions get the best of him. Like he was having a really hard time, like keeping it together and not getting like angry during this, which is not a great look for the jury as well to kind of see the prosecution's lawyer like lose his cool a little bit. So the prosecution also allowed the jury to go to OJ's house. So they got to go on a little field trip. So they decided to take them on this field trip to show how close the Rockingham house was to the Bundy house. Because so much of this is like timing. So they're like, look how close it is. You can get there in like a very short time. They also showed them where Ron's apartment was and also drove by Mezzaluna. And they let the jury tour Nicole's condo at Bundy Lane. And they tried to show the jury like how small it was to prove that like one person could be responsible like in this yard, like front area. And the jury was also allowed to go through the Rockingham house. Many speculate that the defense replaced many pictures in OJ's home. He had different photos hanging up with his rich white friends, and they tried to replace his photo with black friends instead because, OJ was a black man, but it is brought up a lot that he kind of lived a white man's life because he was rich and he did hang out with more white people and like a little disparity there. And so they were trying, since especially the majority of the defense was, I mean, the defense, the majority of the jury was black. They were like, okay,
Hmm.
like come put some of this, some other stuff in here to kind of make him
Yeah.
more, you know, relatable. And Fred Goldman said they'd put a Bible in view and pictures of like the Simpson family. And Kim said they made the house smell like chocolate chip cookies were in the oven and apple cider was on the stove. Like they made it smell like they weren't supposed to touch the house, but they definitely went in there and made it
Yeah.
feel,
Staged it.
yeah. But the defense had a bigger issue on their hands, and that is their star witness, Rosa Lopez, who was OJ's housemaid, and she was thinking of leaving the country. So in Marsha Clark's statement, she said the murder took place at 10:15 p.m. So Cochran's ears perked up at this because he thought Lopez said that the Bronco was home at 10:15 p.m. But she said she saw it around 10 p.m., not 10:15 p.m. like specifically. So when Cochran said her name in opening statements, reporters quickly found where she lived and started stalking her home, which is obviously very scary for her. I'm sure she does not want this attention. Um, So Bundy was a 5-minute drive away from Rockingham, so she knew her testimony could be very damning that about what time she saw the vehicle. So the defense tried to get her own lawyer, and she still felt unsettled, so she quit her job and hid with her daughter in Los Feliz. And Lopez eventually agreed to testify. So she told the court she had a flight to El Salvador the next day, but the prosecution called and there was no reservation. So Darden was trying to make it out that she was unreliable since she wasn't telling the full truth so far. Because she's like, I can only come this one day and I have a flight the next day and then I'm gone. And so they're calling and they're like, you don't have a flight. Like you're lying to us. So Lopez then testified that she saw it sometime after 10, but wasn't sure when. And the jury was also not present for this testimony. It was recorded. They sat for 9 days in the hotel rooms between testimonies. And Rosa Lopez's testimony did not help or hurt either side, and the tapes were never shown to the jury. So
My
they're going
God.
through all this with this woman leaving, maybe not leaving, having her testify when the jury's not there, and then not even showing it to the jury,
Wow.
while a sequestered jury is sitting for 9 days in hotel rooms.
Wow.
On March 9th, the prosecution called Mark Furman to the stand. As we know in hindsight, this is one of the prosecution's biggest mistakes. Um, isn't hindsight is very 2020. Soon after he was called to the stand, Kathleen Bell sent a letter to OJ's attorneys and said she had experienced Furman telling her that she would pull over cars when a black man, not the word he used, was with a white woman, and he would like nothing more for all black people, not the word he used, to be gathered together and killed. You can imagine what word he used. I'm not saying it. No.
Yeah.
So Bell actually believed OJ was guilty, so she's not trying to like help the defense, but she's like, I gotta tell them that this is a thing. Like, it's gotta be
Yeah.
fair if they're gonna convict him.
Exactly.
She later went on Larry King Live and talked about her experience. And Marsha Clark asked him about this on the stand, and he said he did not recognize her, and that conversation never happened. So Mark Furman's like, don't know what you're talking about. He then went on to testify about the glove being found at the Bundy scene and the Rockingham house. And he said he did not plant any evidence and would not have time to. And he didn't really say anything like groundbreaking on the stand that like wasn't already said by other officers, which is kind of why this is so like why let him testify because like he didn't have any like super huge revelation.
Hmm.
Um, and like the decision to allow him to testify was debated due to his possibly like racist past. So it was a gamble to put him on the stand, and that gamble did not work out,
Yeah.
as you'll see. So F. Lee Bailey cross-examined Furman. He asked him if he wiped a glove at the Bronco. He asked this because that could kind of explain how blood from the Bundy scene got to the Rockingham house. So he's like, "Oh, did you have blood on your hand?" And like wipe it like on the Bronco. He then started to question him about the rumors of his racist past, and he asked him if he had ever used the N-word, and Mark Furman said no. He tried to keep pushing and pushing to get him to crack. And this would come back to haunt the prosecution that Furman said no on the stand to him ever using the N-word. Even Kim Goldman was like astonished by this, and she was like, "How can anyone get up there under oath with 100% certainty just say no so easily that you've never said the N-word like ever, like ever,
Hmm.
ever?" You know, like you never know like what happened 10, 15, 20 years ago if you maybe said that sometime when you were a kid, when you were in high school. Like you can't get up there and just testify and be like, nope, never ever uttered that word ever.
I feel like especially at that time too.
Yeah, yeah. So Cato Kalin then took the stand and he testified that he went with OJ to McDonald's around 9:40 p.m. He also testified about the loud thump he heard near the air conditioning unit. Alan Park then testified. He was to drive OJ to the airport that night and he arrived at 10:25 p.m. and the Bronco was not there. He had been nervous about driving a celebrity, so he arrived early and then he rang OJ's door at 10:40 p.m. So he didn't answer. And the Bronco was again still not there. And he didn't want OJ to miss his flight because again it's in an hour. So he called his boss and eventually at around 10:52 he saw OJ arrive and OJ was like, I overslept, I'll be down in a minute. And after this at around 11 p.m. Alan did see the Bronco parked at the house. So the autopsies were brought up by the prosecution, and the autopsy for Nicole Brown said that she had 4 stab wounds to the neck, 3 stab wounds to the scalp, 2 cut wounds on the right hand, and 1 cut wound on the left hand. The opinion was that the death was attributed to multiple sharp force injuries, including a deep incised wound on the neck and multiple stab wounds like on her neck. The toxicology report showed no illegal drugs and a blood alcohol content of 0.02, which is equal to like 2 glasses of wine or a couple of beers. Again, she'd gone to Bezzaluna for dinner. She probably had some wine. She was not
Hmm.
like drunk.
Yeah.
So Ron Goldman's autopsy said there were more than 2 dozen stab wounds to the neck, face, scalp, chest, abdomen, thigh, and hands. And it was also said that there was a stab wound to the left side of the neck that severed the jugular vein, and that was the fatal injury. His toxicology showed no illegal drugs and no alcohol. Again, he'd just come from work, so he hadn't had anything. And both bodies also had multiple ant bites, and that's likely due to remaining at the crime scene for several hours. So, after the shit show of the preliminary hearings, Dr. Irwin Golden did not testify at the trial. They were like, no, not this man.
No, thank you.
Nope. So instead, they called his boss, Dr. Lakshaman Sathyavijayasawaran. That was such a bad attempt. Sathyavijayasawaran? I'm so sorry. So sorry, Dr. L. Um, so sorry. So he talked about the different wounds and presented a possible scenario that he believed happened. He said that Nicole was stabbed 4 times in the neck and then her head was rammed into the metal gate or fence, knocking her unconscious. Now, Ron Goldman shows up and the attacker is surprised, and the attacker grabs him from behind and forces him into a small gated area. The attacker then made 2 parallel cuts on Ron's neck. They were controlled because Ron had no way of escaping in this area. And these cuts would be fatal, but it seems the attacker stabbed him a few more times after that, including one in his chest. Then the attacker returns to Nicole, and the attacker placed their foot on her back, grabbed her hair, and pulled her head, exposing her throat. The attacker then cut her neck. Um, However, a lot of this is conjecture. Like he's just saying, I think this is what happened. It's not like we have a video proving this is what happened. And it is possible other physical scenarios happened as well. He also testified at how quickly this attack could have happened and how quickly the victims would have died. This is important for the prosecution since the window for OJ to commit these crimes is already tight. So they're like, we need to prove how quickly this actually could have happened. And kind of a weird stopping point, but it's just is what it is. But at this point in the trial, they do kind of start to bring up DNA evidence, which gets is a whole nother beast in itself. So we're going to stop here for part two. And then we'll have part three next week or immediately if you're on patreon.com, Grimes. And that will conclude the trial and events leading up to present day. So um, a lot more info, a lot
Yes.
more info still, and a lot of info so far. But as you can see, this trial is wild.
Yeah. There is a lot happening in this case.
Yes.
So again, to give you guys a little upper before you leave, try to mix it in where we
hmm
can. Courtney, what is your perk of the week?
So my perk of the week is that last night Kevin and I went to see Maxine, which is like the
Mm.
third in a trilogy. And I
Hmm.
really enjoyed it. I'd heard
Nice.
mixed reviews, but I really liked it. It was very much that like 1980s Hollywood. There's the Night
Mm.
Stalker. There's a horror element. I don't know. I really enjoyed it. I thought it was very good. I liked the whole trilogy in general. It's like X Pearl and now Maxine. And I just thought it was really well done and just like really interesting. So yeah, shout out to my Regal Unlimited Pass where I can just go watch any movie I want now
Yeah.
because it's if you're someone who would go to the movies at least twice a month, it's definitely worth it because
Yeah. That's awesome.
it's nice to just be able to be like, all right, pick a movie, go watch it. Don't really have to
Hmm.
spend it. Well, you pay for the monthly subscription, but you don't really have to spend any money. It's already paid for.
It already came out, so it doesn't count.
Yeah, but and then I convinced Kevin to get Cruise Farms afterwards because I've had a
Love it.
major sweet tooth
What
this
flavor
week.
did you get?
I got the chocolate and sweet cream swirl
Oh,
because I'm
yum.
kind of basic and that's what I get a lot. And then I get rainbow sprinkles on it. But then
Of
I was
course.
very upset because normally I get a cup because a cone is so messy, but like
Hmm.
I just really wanted a waffle cone, like really,
Hmm.
really wanted a waffle cone. So I was like, I'm gonna suck it up. My waffle cone was broken
Oh
at the
no.
bottom. And so I'm
Oh
like having
no.
to like eat it really quick and like hold it together so that the
Yeah.
bottom doesn't just fall
I feel
out.
like you got to get the waffle cone in a cup so that you can just,
Yeah.
as it's
That's usually what
going everywhere.
that's usually what Kevin does if he orders it
Yeah.
like that. And like people always kind of look at him funny, but it's really genius. He'll be like, I want an ice cream cone and a cup on the side. And they're like,
Yeah.
you want it? And he's like, on the side. I want to
Yeah,
dump it in there.
exactly.
But
Place is so good.
yeah,
I love it.
so good. They also had a lavender honey candle, but it didn't smell as good as I thought it was going to.
Oh, that's
But
sad.
the sweet cream one smelled delicious.
Mm, I
I
love
mean, the
it.
lavender honey didn't smell bad, but it just was like I
Not
wanted
the
more.
best. Yeah.
Yeah.
Speaking of candles, I got those that has like the wick that like makes the like crackling sound.
Oh yeah.
I can't remember
Like
what
the
they're called,
little
but I got one of those in coconut honey. It may be my new favorite candle. I love it so
nice.
much. It's the perfect like summer scent that's not like
Mm-hmm.
I don't love like an overly like floral scent, but
Mm-hmm.
it's just like the good mixture of like sweet and like not earthy, but like not like that's super because you have the coconuts, you got like a nutty kind of, but it's not
Yeah.
like an overly sweet scent. Anyway, I very much love it. But
Yes. But yes, that is my perk of the week. Jacqueline, what is your perk of the week?
so my perk of the week, and you guys are gonna laugh at me because we're recording 3 episodes back to back, and I don't have that much going on in my life. That's like I was literally sitting here, I was like, have I finished a book? Have I watched a TV show, a movie, any of those things? No, I haven't.
hmm
Um, but we did start working on clearing out our baby's room that has been a junk room, which is where I record this podcast, by the way. But
hmm
was it this episode or last week? I can't remember that I mentioned that we worked on cleaning out this room. But so we don't have a ton of storage space in this house. So we went to Home Depot and we got a lot of like shelving, box storagey type situations.
hmm
And I feel like I should have done like before and after pictures because it's just so satisfying. Like my closet and my daughter's closet, like we like took everything out and like put in like the new shelves and like the little boxes and then everything's all like lovely and organized in it. And it just like, it's so pretty to look at, where it's
It's
just
very
like
satisfying. Yeah.
so organized. And we'll see how long that lasts before shit just starts getting thrown in there again. But, for right now, it looks lovely. And hopefully it will make things a little more organized as we bring another human into this household where we will now have 4 humans and 3 animals. So there's a lot happening.
There's a lot going on in that house.
And like, it's not a small house, but it's not a huge house either. So,
Yeah.
but yeah, that is my perk of the week. Is just we love a good organization day, a good closet
Hmm.
before and after, some shelves and boxes. Nothing makes me
Yeah.
happier.
I'm very much into organization right now and like, you know,
When we go to
planning my whole
Nashville,
life.
we should go to the Container Store.
You might convince me this time.
I love the Container Store.
Is it as fun as an IKEA though? Because
It depends on how much you like organization.
let me tell you what, gardening and going to an IKEA is a next level experience.
Yeah,
Next level. Best
I
time I've
can see
ever had in my
that.
life. Best time I've ever had in my life.
I can definitely see that.
So it just depends if it's as fun as an IKEA.
Well, we can garden
I
first
guess we
and
can
then
see.
go
I guess
to
we
the
can see.
Container Store and see what you
Yeah, we
think.
can see. All right.
So yeah, let us know. You guys know,
If
I don't
you've
know.
gardened and gone to an IKEA.
Let us know your
Uh,
experience with that. We're in all the places on all the things. You can find us in the show note.
mhm.
There's some lovely links. I'm not going to plug it again. I am going to plug it again. Patreon.com/caffeinated crimes if you want the conclusion of this episode right now. Um,
Mhm.
I don't even know what else to say at this point. It's after 11 p.m. Courtney, take it away.
Yes, and then if you wouldn't mind to give us 5 stars on Apple, on Spotify, on anywhere that has some kind of rating system, and you can give us a nice little rating on Yelp. I don't think we're on Yelp yet. We could be, I guess. What if we put ourselves on Yelp? That would be really
Yes.
funny. Anyway, um, I got derailed. Um, then we're also on YouTube if you want to like, subscribe, leave a nice comment. Yeah, but in the meantime, go have a cup of coffee.
And don't commit a crime.